Today's an important day. It's Juneteenth Day, now recognized as a national holiday. Some facts about Juneteenth. Fact 1. Following the issuing of the Emancipation Proclamation on January 1st, 1863, not all enslaved people immediately found freedom. Fact 2. The Civil War ended in the summer of 1865. That's 2 years later. Union General Gordon Granger and his troops traveled to Galveston, Texas to announce the General Orders No. 3 on June 19, 1865. June 19th would go on to be known and celebrated as Juneteenth. 3. Part of the General Order No. 3 encouraged the newly freed people to remain with their past owners. Fact 4 of 5. The period after Juneteenth is known as the scatter. Undeterred by the recommendation to remain in place, many former slaves left the area during the original reading. In the following weeks, formerly enslaved people left Texas in great numbers to find their family members and make their way to the postbellum United States. Fact 5. Juneteenth has been celebrated under many names: Freedom Day, Jubilee Day, and Liberation Day, Second Independence Day, and Emancipation Day, to name just a few. Partway through their class today, I'd speak a little bit more about the Black influence in classical music. Be ready for a few surprises, and we just got a visitor here, one of the cats. So earlier today, I shared about Emancipation Day, Juneteenth. It's the first time in our history that has become a national holiday. It's about time. And I wanted to share something that I came across from, it's called Demand Africa. I'll just quote it. It's important to reference how Beethoven was considered in the public eye. Many texts have uncovered that refer to Beethoven as a Moor, M-O-O-R. In this era, Moor translates to Negro, before the term was extended to include Arabs at later times. The German translation for Negro is also Moor. A renowned Beethoven historian, Alexander Thayer, can be quoted as stating, Beethoven had even more of the Moor in his features than his master, Joseph Haydn. Many people suggest that the Moors introduced the classical music style to Europe, evident by the hint that Beethoven's musical master was also of Moorish African descent. A description of Beethoven was also discovered, written by one of his close friends, Frau Fischer. Beethoven is described as having a blackish-brown complexion and short, stocky, broad shoulders, short neck, round nose. A similar description was given by Friedrich Hertz, a German anthropologist, in his book called Race and Civilization. He mentions that Beethoven has Negroid traits, dark skin, and a flat, thick nose. Combine these descriptions with the visual depiction of his curly hair, and we can draw parallels between characteristics of people of African descent, such as African Americans or West Indian mulattoes. And I'd like to quote also from another publication, and that one's called LudwigVan.com. It's out of Toronto. I'm into Beethoven, so I follow some of these publications. On my birthday last year, September 29th, 2020, Ludwig van Beethoven was featured in a publication that I just mentioned. And it was in the middle of a year-long celebrations of his 250th birthday throughout the classical musical world. Sadly, we didn't have a lot of live concerts, but it was celebrated nonetheless. The feature article is entitled, "Was Beethoven Black?" And I'll read from that, just excerpts. As a theory, however, it turns out the idea has been bouncing around for more than a century. The question itself may not be the most interesting part. A look at the evidence reveals a great deal about the intersections of culture and race in the Western world. Samuel Coleridge Taylor was a mixed-race composer and conductor well known in England in his day. In 1907, it's more than 100 years ago, he wrote what is now cited as the first documentation of the theory that Beethoven was black. During the early to mid-20th century, black scholars were looking to reclaim their own history. Some of Beethoven's contemporaries noticed the fact that his coloring was dark or swarthy. Prince Nicholas Esterhazy of the infamous Habsburg royal family is said to have called both Beethoven and Joseph Haydn, his court composer, Moors. To Europeans in the 18th century, a Moor might be someone who came from northern Africa or simply a person with a dark complexion. This theory, however, is not based on genealogical studies of Beethoven's past, which are available to the public. Rather, it's based on the assumption that one of Beethoven's relatives had had an affair. I'd rather just go by what he looked like and what he endured as a musician. Not from these sources, but what I read earlier, I think about a year ago, I dug in deep. I had time, and I found out that, well, first of all, his mother was Moorish, and she died. She had 7 or 8 children, and she died at the age of 40. Our musician Beethoven was a genius, and when he went out to perform, he put white powder on his face to lighten his skin. And for this reason, the paintings that we see and many of the depictions of what he looked like show him with a lighter face. So it's really from these more recent diaries and publications that people are finding out more about Beethoven. Oh yes. Tira Thurman, a professor at the University of Michigan, is quoted in a notable publication, the Smithsonian magazine. There is a way in which white people historically have constantly denied black people of any association with genius, she says. In a lot of ways, there's no figure that we can associate more with genius than Beethoven himself. The implication of the idea that Beethoven might be black was so powerful and was so exciting and so tantalizing because it threatens to overturn how people have understood or talked about race and racial hierarchy in the United States and across the world.